My wife went on a luxury spending spree after my promotion, then secretly flew to Miami without our kids. So I cut her off and filed for divorce. My wife, Mallory, and I are both 38. We've been married for 10 years and together for nearly 13. Our relationship has always been pretty steady, no affairs, no major fallouts, and even our families get along just fine. We've also been blessed with 2 incredible kids, our 7-year-old daughter and our 5-year-old son. Both of us come from similar financial backgrounds. Our parents provided us with a comfortable upbringing, but we weren't spoiled. So, to this day, I can't quite figure out where Mallory picked up the habit of spending money so freely whenever she felt she had even a little extra. If I had to name one ongoing issue in our relationship, it would be that, her tendency to splurge as soon as there's some financial breathing room. She believes money is meant to be spent, while I take a more cautious approach. It's the one thing we've never really seen eye to eye on, though it's never escalated into a serious fight. We'd usually just let it slide. But things started shifting about a year ago when I landed a promotion to CFO at my company, which came with a hefty salary bump. Naturally, I shared the good news with Mallory, and I made it clear that just because I was earning more didn't mean we should start spending recklessly. I don't think that part of the conversation registered with her, though, because not long after, she started indulging in extravagant purchases more often. At first, it was shopping sprees, nothing too concerning. But then she began splurging on high-end designer brands, all on my dime. And before I knew it, she was redecorating the entire house, tossing out perfectly good furniture just so she could replace everything with newer, trendier pieces. You can imagine how much that cost, especially considering she wasn't contributing a single cent toward these expenses. Mallory has a job, she's a high school teacher, but her paycheck is nowhere near mine, and she works significantly fewer hours than I do. She also takes on most of the household responsibilities and spends more time with the kids, which, to be fair, isn't easy. That was her argument in the beginning. She felt overworked, unappreciated, and like she deserved a reward for holding down the fort, especially since my job often required me to work late or travel before my promotion. I understood her frustration, so even though I tried to talk to her about cutting back, I never actually put my foot down. I hoped she'd see my point and rein in the spending on her own, but that never happened. Instead, things just kept escalating. Every time I brought it up, she made me feel like I was being stingy, like I was denying her something she had every right to enjoy. She had a way of making me feel guilty for even questioning it. Lately, we'd been fighting about money more than ever. Despite my higher salary, we weren't saving anything because of her excessive spending. Then, last week, she took things to an entirely new level. I came home from work one evening to find that the babysitter was there, looking after our kids. That immediately threw me off because we only ever call the sitter when we both need to be out. Mallory hadn't mentioned any plans, which she normally does, even if it's just brunch with friends. I do the same for her. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. After a few attempts, I asked the babysitter what was going on. That's when she casually informed me that Mallory had paid her to stay with the kids full-time for an entire week, day and night. That completely blindsided me. I had no clue what was happening. I let the babysitter handle things while I kept dialing Mallory, her parents, anyone who might have an answer. No one picked up. I even reached out to her friends, but they were just as clueless as I was. After nearly 3 hours of nonstop calling, she finally answered. The moment she did, I unloaded on her. I wasn't about to let this go. Her behavior was beyond unreasonable, and I deserved an explanation. That's when she casually told me she hadn't answered earlier because she was on a flight. Her parents were with her too. They had taken a trip to Miami. Just like that. No warning, no discussion, she had packed up and left for a week-long vacation with her parents without so much as mentioning it to me. I had to ask her outright why she'd gone without me or the kids. I already knew she planned on staying a week. Our babysitter had let that slip. So I pressed her for an answer, and instead of acknowledging how messed up that was, she got defensive. She insisted I had no right to be upset because she'd always done everything she could to keep our family happy, and now it was time for her to do something for her parents. I told her I didn't have a problem with that. What I did have a problem with was the fact that she never even thought it was necessary to talk to me about it first. That had been the pattern all year. She made major financial decisions without even considering my input. Before I could say anything else, she cut me off rudely, at that telling me she needed and deserved a break. Then she hung up. I tried calling her again, but she didn't answer. And that, right there, was the last straw for me. I had put up with Mallory's behavior for a long time, but I had finally reached my breaking point. I just couldn't do it anymore. So, without wasting any time, I made a few calls and had her credit cards blocked, all except the one that was solely in her name. Once I got confirmation that the cards were no longer usable, the calls and messages from her started pouring in. But I wasn't interested in hearing her out, so I muted every notification. After that, I reached out to a friend of mine who put me in touch with his divorce lawyer. I laid everything out for the attorney, explaining the situation in detail, and told him to start drafting the divorce papers immediately. I was done. 2 days later, Mallory came home. The moment I opened the door, she launched into an apology, saying she never realized how much she had hurt me. She told me she had taken the next available flight home the second she understood the gravity of her mistake. She even claimed she would have returned sooner, but storms had cancelled all flights, forcing her and her parents to stay longer. Now that she was back, she wanted to sit down, explain her side of things, and try to work it all out. But it was too late. The night before, my lawyer had already delivered the divorce papers, and I had them ready. Without a word, I shoved them at her and told her she needed to deal with them because I was finished. As she stood there, reading over the papers, I shut the door in her face. Seconds later, she exploded, banging on the door, screaming, pleading for me to open it. Over and over, she kept yelling that I couldn't do this to her. It was painful to hear, and as much as it hurt me, I refused to let her break me down. Thankfully, our kids weren't around to witness any of it. I had sent them to stay with my parents for a few days because I had a feeling something like this would happen. They didn't have to see their mother falling apart, and they didn't have to watch me turn my back on her, either. Mallory kept pounding on the door for a solid 15 minutes before she finally gave up. I assume she went back to her parents' house after that. Since then, for the past week, she's been doing everything she can to get me to talk to her. I still haven't blocked her, mainly because of the kids. I know that at some point, we'll have to communicate, so blocking her feels pointless. I've ignored most of her messages, but I've read a few, just out of curiosity. Her messages are all over the place. Most of the time, she's apologizing profusely not just for this latest stunt, but for everything. She keeps promising she'll get her spending under control and be more mindful of our finances. But every now and then, the tone shifts. In some texts, she tells me I'm being too harsh, that I can't just throw away 13 years of our relationship and a decade of marriage over this. She insists that we can work things out, but only if I'm willing to try. One message in particular stuck with me. She said she understood why I was angry, that I had every right to be. But at the end of the day, we have 2 kids, and I needed to think about them, too. She accused me of letting my pride get in the way, of being so focused on my own anger that I wasn't considering what was best for our family. She pointed out that most couples at least try to work through their issues instead of rushing straight to divorce. For some reason, that message really got to me. Maybe it was because she brought up the kids. Suddenly, I started second-guessing everything. Was I being too hasty? Had I let my frustration push me into making a rash decision? It's not like this hasn't been difficult for me, too. Coming to terms with the idea of divorce hasn't been easy, and now I realize I haven't thought about the kids as much as I should have. I've been visiting them at my parents' house, trying to keep things as normal as possible, but I can tell they're unhappy. And the truth is, as flawed as Mallory is, she's always been a good mother. She wasn't wrong when she said she spent years making sure our family was happy. So maybe I jumped the gun. Maybe I should have tried to talk things through with her before taking such a drastic step. Update 1. After reading through a lot of the comments, I realized that I still had things I needed to discuss with Mallory before making such a life-altering decision. And it wasn't just the strangers on the internet saying that even my friends and family thought it would be a good idea to sit down and talk. So yesterday, I reached out to her. I told her I was willing to meet for lunch and have a conversation. She was desperate to see the kids, but we agreed to leave them out of it, at least for now. We needed to focus on talking things through, and I knew that wouldn't be possible with them around. I did tell her she was welcome to visit them at my parents' house anytime, though. The lunch itself started off awkward. Neither of us really knew what to say at first. But then she just dove right in. She apologized again, sincerely this time. She admitted that from her perspective, she had always felt like I was being overly stingy with money instead of allowing us to enjoy life a little. But she also confessed something else, something I don't think she had ever been willing to say out loud before. She acknowledged that she had a problem. For years, she had been in denial, convincing herself that she was the perfect wife, that there was nothing wrong with how she handled money. But deep down, she knew she had an issue with overspending. She just wasn't willing to admit it. Mallory admitted that in some twisted way, all her spending had just been a distraction, something to keep her occupied because, deep down, she felt incredibly lonely. And, honestly, I couldn't say I was surprised. This wasn't the first time we'd talked about how isolated she sometimes felt. Being a high school teacher meant she had shorter work hours than me, but that also meant she spent a lot of time alone at home. Over the years, she had lost touch with a lot of the friends she once had. Most of them were either too busy during the week or had their own plans on weekends, the very same day she wanted to spend with me and the kids. Because of that, she never really built any deep friendships in the last 10 years. After we got married and had our children, the people she was once close to slowly drifted away. Now, she only saw them occasionally, and in her own words, shopping became her way of filling that void. Retail therapy, as she put it, gave her a sense of happiness and purpose. Buying things, whether it was redecorating the house or splurging on shopping sprees, made her feel like she was doing something productive. The problem was, she never stopped to consider how far she was taking it, and that's what led to so many fights between us. Tears started streaming down her face as she told me all this, and at that moment, I could truly see how lonely she had become. The truth was, she had dedicated so much of herself to our family that she had lost a part of who she was. And I had to admit, it was largely because of the sacrifices she had made for me and for us. When our first child was born, she put everything on the back burner, her time, her friendships, even her personal freedom, because someone had to take care of things at home. My job kept me out late most nights, and by the time I got home, I was completely drained. That meant she had to handle most of the household responsibilities alone. Then, when we had our second child, she went even further, juggling 2 kids and managing the home so that I wouldn't have to worry about anything extra. It was a partnership, sure, but I had to give credit where it was due. She did her part exceptionally well. As we talked, it hit me hard. We had spent 10 years building a life together, making sure our family was happy. I realized that I couldn't just throw all of that away out of anger. Yes, I was hurt. Yes, I was furious over what she had done. But she was standing right in front of me, taking accountability for her actions and genuinely wanting to change. I owed it to her, and to our kids, to at least try. I reached out to calm her down as she cried, telling her that I was willing to work on our marriage. But for now, I thought it would be best if we spent a few days apart to cool off. She agreed without hesitation. We both understood that this wasn't something we could fix overnight. We had just gone through one of the biggest fights of our lives. Hell, I had already started divorce proceedings. That wasn't something we could just brush under the rug. But as much as I needed space, I couldn't keep her away from the kids. I let her know they were staying at my parents' house and told her she was free to visit them whenever she wanted. That seemed to give her some relief. In the end, we left the conversation on a surprisingly positive note. Before parting ways, we agreed to meet again in exactly 1 week. In the meantime, I planned to speak to my lawyer and put the divorce proceedings on hold. Update 2. Yesterday, Mallory and I met again. Over the past week, we had kept in touch, and both of us came to the same realization: our marriage hadn't been in a good place for a long time. It wasn't just her spending or my frustration, there were deeper issues that we had ignored for too long. If we were going to fix things, we had to face them head on. So, together, we made a decision. We were going to see a marriage counselor. We didn't expect it to be easy, but the one thing we both agreed on was that we still loved each other. And as long as that was true, we believed we could find a way to work through our problems. This past week apart gave me a lot of time to reflect. Mallory wasn't wrong. I did spend most of my life working, just like she spent most of her time spending. Both of us were excessive in our own ways, and it had taken a serious toll on our marriage, to the point where divorce was on the table. That needed to change. I won't pretend that everyone supports my decision. Plenty of people, both online and in my own life, think I'm making a mistake. Some have outright called me weak for even considering staying with her after what she did. But at the end of the day, none of that matters. She's the mother of my children. We've built a life together. One fight, no matter how big, doesn't erase the years we've spent together. And besides, this isn't just about us. It's about our kids, too. They need both of their parents in their lives, and I refuse to let my pride get in the way of that. I know there will always be people who disagree with my choice, but they only know the pieces of the story I've shared. I'm the one who has lived this relationship for over a decade, and I know in my heart that I'm doing what's best for me, for Mallory, and for our family. That doesn't mean I'm disregarding advice or ignoring people's experiences. But at the end of the day, this is my life, and I'm choosing to fight for it. At the end of the day, a handful of people on the internet disagreeing with my decision isn't going to change my mind. That's just the way it is. I know what's best for me and my family, and I stand by what I've chosen to do. After our 1-week break, when Mallory and I finally met again, everything felt different in a good way. We were both in a much better frame of mind, and the moment we saw each other, we hugged. And in that instant, I knew I was making the right choice. Neither of us was ready to let go, and that was all the confirmation I needed. Honestly, It's not surprising. She was my first real love, and I was hers. But somewhere along the way, we lost touch with each other, buried under the weight of responsibilities, work, and family. Like people always say, life just got in the way. But that's behind us now. Mallory officially moved back in this morning, and I brought the kids home from my parents' house. We're all under the same roof again, exactly how it should be. And that's how I want it to stay for the rest of our lives. These past 2 weeks have been tough on all of us. But more than anyone, it was hardest on the kids. Mallory and I are adults, we can process our emotions, talk things through. But for them, it was confusing and upsetting, no matter how much they loved their grandparents. The second we were all back together, I saw the happiness on their faces, and it hit me, I never want to put them through something like this again. That's what makes it easy to forgive Mallory. Knowing that, in the end, we're doing what's best for our family. While we talked yesterday, we both agreed what she did wasn't okay. She admitted that the only reason she left without telling me was because she already knew I wouldn't be fine with it. And, in her mind, she felt like she shouldn't have to ask permission since she's a grown woman. We worked through that as well because the issue was never about her needing my permission, it was about respect, transparency, and taking our family into account before making a big decision. And she hadn't done that. She apologized once again, and I told her I was ready to let it go. We both wanted a fresh start, and that's exactly what we gave each other. Even today, just a few hours ago, after the kids had fallen asleep, we ended up talking again. And once more, Mallory apologized for everything, for being inconsiderate, for the past year of reckless spending, for the way she had treated our finances like they didn't matter. She started crying again, and I did what I always do, I comforted her. But this time, we didn't just make promises. We made sure that we would actually follow through. Because the worst mistake of our lives was forgetting about each other, forgetting about our kids, while we tried to juggle everything else. We let our relationship fall into the background, assuming it would always be fine. And that can't happen again. We have to do better. Update 3. It's been almost 6 months since my last update. I waited on purpose because I wanted to reach this milestone before sharing anything new. After my last post, plenty of people still told me I was making a mistake, that this wouldn't work out, that I was being a pushover for giving Mallory another chance. Some people even went out of their way to message me personally just to tell me I was screwing up. But none of that matters. Because here we are, 6 months later, and things have never been better. Mallory and I have been in couples counseling, putting in the effort to work through our issues, and to be honest, it's been the best decision we could have made. We're happier together than we've been in years, and most importantly, our kids are thriving. One of the biggest changes? We're not constantly nitpicking or throwing passive-aggressive jabs at each other anymore, something we used to do all the time without even realizing it. We had no idea how much it affected our kids, either. But as we started working on it, we became more aware of the subtle ways we had been hurting each other and, by extension, our family. Now, instead of bottling things up or acting out like immature teenagers, we address issues head-on. And that has made all the difference. Of course, we still have our moments. No marriage is perfect. There are times when we have to remind ourselves to stay patient, and sometimes, we do need to let out our frustrations and have a real fight. But at the end of the day, we always find a way to work through it. Every single time. And that's what really matters. Everyone in our lives, our families, our friends, is relieved that we didn't go through with the divorce. Especially our parents. They've seen how far we've come, and they know that this decision was the right one. Looking back, I don't regret giving Mallory another chance. Because at the end of the day, love isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to fight for each other, even when things get hard. And that's exactly what we're doing. At first, our families weren't exactly against the idea of us separating, but over time, they came around to the fact that maybe divorce would have been too drastic. And honestly, I think they were right. Looking back, I don't believe ending our marriage would have made either of us any happier, we likely would have just ended up miserable in different ways. Now, I'm not saying staying together is the right solution for everyone. Every situation is different, and I completely respect that. But for us, the best choice was to work through our problems rather than walk away from everything we'd built. And I'm happy to say that both Mallory and I have kept every promise we made to each other. For my part, I've cut back on the long hours at work. I've started making a real effort to be present, to spend more quality time with my family. We've been taking weekend trips, going out to dinner together, and just making memories as a family. And the more I do it, the more I realize just how much I've been missing out on all these years. If I'm being honest, the rat race just isn't worth losing my family over. Sure, scaling back at work might slow my career progression. I might even be passed over for future promotions. But I don't care. I'll put in the work I need to, but I refuse to let my job consume my entire life. Mallory, on the other hand, has been making changes too. Instead of devoting every waking moment to the family and then compensating for her lack of personal time by splurging, she's learned to prioritize herself in a healthier way. She's started going out with friends more often, picking up new hobbies, and focusing on self-care. And I have to say, it's a welcome change. She seems genuinely happier. And what's even better is that her spending habits have balanced out as well. All in all, we're in a much better place than we were 6 months ago. Probably better than we've been in years. And I think all of us, Mallory, the kids, and myself, are just really grateful that we chose to stick it out. Update 4. Hey everyone, it's been over a year since my last update, and I've got some big news. In just a couple of weeks, Mallory and I are going to be hosting a ceremony to renew our wedding vows. These past few months have been incredible, and we felt like this was the perfect way to celebrate how far we've come. This time, it's going to be a much bigger event than our original wedding. Back then, we were just starting out in our careers and had to rely heavily on our parents to cover the wedding expenses. We kept things simple because it was the responsible thing to do. But now, we can finally afford to go all out. And the best part? This time, we're completely on the same page about it. We both feel like we deserve this moment, like we've earned it. But that's not even the most special part. Yesterday, Mallory surprised me with an early gift, a pair of stunning platinum cufflinks. Now, just to be clear, these were very expensive. Mallory still makes significantly less than I do, so I know this was a huge purchase for her. But what makes it truly meaningful isn't the price, it's the thought behind it. She told me she had originally planned to wait until the vow renewal to give them to me, but she just couldn't hold back because she wanted to see my reaction. She said that she's beyond grateful to have me in her life, because, in her words, any other man in my position probably wouldn't have taken her back after everything that happened. But I did. I put our family first, and I chose to fight for us. And this was her way of showing me just how much that meant to her. I'm not an overly emotional guy, but I'll be honest, I broke down. After everything we've been through, after all the struggles, we've finally reached a place where everything feels right. And for the first time in a long time, I can say with confidence that we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Also, I won't lie, getting such an extravagant gift was a huge deal for me. I've always been the one giving expensive gifts, whether to Mallory or the rest of my family. I've never really been on the receiving end like this. And that made it all the more special. I told Mallory exactly how much I appreciated it. But more than that, I reminded her of something I've always believed: we're a team. And no matter what, our family will always come first. I said it to her, and I'll say it here. I am more than grateful to have her in my life.